Happy Wednesday night. Welcome to Deep in the Plus. I'm your host, Rob Whiteside. Thank you, as always, for being with us. We really appreciate it. If you have not already, here's the drill. Subscribe to WDWNT TV, and also please give this video a thumbs up as it helps people to find us. It is spooky season, so we thought we'd talk about some spooky stuff, but we've done a lot of the spooky stuff already. But one of our favorite spooky things is the Haunted Mansion, and we decided to go behind the attraction with my good friend Allison. Allison, how are you?
I'm doing well tonight. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. So the Haunted Mansion is, to me, it's one of those. I hate to say iconic because it's overused, but it's one of those must-dos anytime I go to a castle park. The Haunted Mansion and Pirates of the Caribbean, to me, are quintessential Disney attractions, and so I am excited to talk to you about this episode of Behind the Attraction. So Behind the Attraction is a show where they went behind the attraction. I know it's very, apropos, the name, but this was something that was produced by Dwayne Johnson, and Paget Brewster is the narrator of all of these, and I think they're fun. But before we get into that, let me talk to you about the Haunted Mansion. What are your vibes? How are you feeling? What's your history?
Sure. Well, it's one of my favorite rides of all time, which is funny because it's not really like the aesthetic that I like, but it's just, and we'll get into it in the show, just so well done. And it's so great for the imagination when you're a kid, and it's timeless. And I loved it so much that like in college, there was a Haunted Mansion fan site back when like the Disney internet didn't know what to do with itself. And they like had email domains through them. So I actually had an email domain that was like my name and like doombuggies.com. You could have like that or grimgrinningghost.com. And that was my main email for like several years. So that's how big of a fan I am and how much I love this attraction.
But not anymore, is what you're saying. This is not how we reach you now, is through your Dune
No, it's
Buggy
not. I
address.
don't think that website exists any longer, and who knows what has happened to that email. That was back when you like went onto like uh, Internet Explorer to access websites and access your email. But anyway, yeah, once Gmail came in, that was out for me. But for a while, that was my main form of communication.
We're learning so much about you. This is awesome. So Behind the Attraction, the series, there are a ton of things that go and talk about Disney parks history. The Imagineering story comes to mind. That was something else that dropped on here that we haven't talked about yet. But they're a lot more serious. This one to me, this entire series. And have you seen more than just this episode?
I have, I've, of course, seen every episode of it when it dropped, so it's been a while. I
Right. It came
revisited
out.
this episode for the show.
It came out in July of 2021. They have 10 episodes. The first episode was The Jungle Cruise because, again, produced by Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. The Jungle Cruise movie had just come out, and so I think that they obviously led with that one first. But it's a little campy. It's a little quick. Paget Brewster, who I love, she's very obviously it's a scripted, but she's very fast in the way that they present it, and it's kind of tongue in cheek, and they go back and forth. And to me, it's a great way to digest more information. Most of the stuff, I think, just like you, I probably knew a lot of it, but it's neat to see it kind of represented in this kind of package, right?
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. It reminds me of sort of the 90s Walt Disney World Inside Out shows that they had, where they would just have like these like at first it was just like a 7 minute short that they'd play in between shows, and then they had like a half hour show. But it was really fast and really fun, and more like an infomercial almost than it was like a documentary. And that's sort of how these feel. But I think this is really accessible because I've like my best friend's like a Disney fan, but is not like a like would not identify as a Disney adult as I would, and she loves these, and she's always like
Right.
watching them and texting me. So I think it's a way to make some of the like the deeper cut fan stuff a little bit more digestible and a little more accessible to people who aren't super fans. But at the same time, for me, I always want more. So this is like really fun, but I want like a 4 hour documentary of like each Imagineer and then come back to the main story. Like I would love like a box set that's like 12 episodes long. But for what it is, this is really fun.
Yeah, there was a lot of on the Travel Channel. They used to have these 1 hour specials. It was
Oh
like,
yeah.
hey, the thrills of Disney World that you never knew existed, and it was, I TiVoed all of those and watched them
Same.
all the time. So that it gives me those kind of feels too, because those were also a little bit more fast paced in the way they were presented. Again, this one was 10 episodes, but we're going to concentrate only on the Haunted Mansion one because it's spooky season. Also, because I think each of these could be kind of a conversation unto themselves, because, as park fans, we definitely want to talk about the theme park side of this, but I also think about the presentation of something like this. It's a different way to show the same information. I like the interviews. I think those are cool. It's at least interviews with people who have either are touching the Haunted Mansion now or have touched it in the past. Rolly Crump was one of the main guys in this one, and we got to see him a lot. And unfortunately, he's since passed away since this came out. But it's neat that they got to talk to him before that happened. Again, July 2021 is when this came out, and I remember seeing it then too. And it was very digestible, like sit at the table and watch it with the family kind of a thing, and be able to suck people in for 45 minutes. They're all about 40 to 45 minutes. But honestly, this one stands out to me in general because I love the Haunted Mansion. There's a lot of stuff as they're going through it that they talk about from the old days of the Haunted Mansion, the things that, again, as Disney fans, we sort of already knew about. One of those being that, that when this first came to be, Walt wanted a Haunted Mansion in Disneyland when it opened, and when it opened, there was no Haunted Mansion. And then they built the building, but there still wasn't an attraction, and they didn't know what it was going to be, and they went back and forth. And to me, what this reminds me of instantly is Epcot, because they
Mm.
took two ideas. They took the funny and the scary, the Claude Coates and the Mark Davis, and they put them together. They pushed them together, the same way that the lore goes about Epcot, where they have all these ideas for how are we going to make Epcot, and it's not Walt's vision, but something similar, and they pushed the two models together for World Showcase and Future World, and came up with a park. So I mean, I assume this never entered your mind.
No, but it makes a lot. Well, it makes a lot of sense, and I think like also these are two projects that Walt didn't get to see to fruition. Fruition, so he didn't get to see the final product. That even though like all of this is his brainchild and his like engineering and his people resources engineering, and stoking the creativity of like some real geniuses, but he didn't get to see the final thing.
Yeah. That's. I mean, he passed away while they were working on Pirates of the Caribbean. He didn't get to see that one actually open, I don't believe. And then this project was kind of put on hold while Pirates was taking place. When you watched this, were you surprised? Did you learn anything about how many people were involved? Like, I knew Mark Davis was involved, and I knew Ex
Mm-hmm.
Intencio was involved, but like Claude Coates and Raleigh and Yale Gracie, like there's so many people involved with it.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think Claude Coates and Mark Davis, of course, I knew the story and the lore with these two, the competing visions. But like the Yale Gracie and the Rolly Crump and the Ken Anderson and the early concepts, like that stuff was sort of new, or at least a refresher for me, because it's been a really long time since I've looked into Haunted Mansion history, and it's kind of nice to have it presented so quickly, but also like frustrating because like in order for me to retain it for like further, I need a deeper dive, and I feel like this is too fast for me to remember all of the people that are involved. But you're right, it's like a who's who of like Disney Imagineering legends.
Yeah, Legends. That's exactly what I was thinking too. This is like, I when I was a kid, I didn't know Master Gracie was like a dude. Like it was like based on,
Yeah.
Yale Gracie and the tricks that he brought to the table. And then the same thing goes with uh, Leota Toombs. Like, what the heck? Why? How can Toombs be your last name and you're working on the Haunted Mansion?
Not just, I mean, the first name is also perfect. Like, it's like she could have, like, her name could be like Emily. It would be like, her name is
Right. It
Leota. It's so
it it
evocative.
it wrote itself. It wrote itself.
Yeah.
Madame Leota. There she is. It's like Leota Toombs, and that's her. And then I also love the story of like Kim Irvine. Like I believe that like
Mm-hmm.
she married like another like descendant of Imagineering, and it's just like all in the family. But that Kim Irvine is now an Imagineer, and actually I don't know that they talked about this in the in the special, but I believe that she is featured in the Haunted Mansion holiday version as the Madame
Hmm.
Leota floating head. So that's kind of cool too.
Yeah.
But I'm getting ahead of myself. So the other thing that struck me, and don't hate me for this because it's kind of poking a little bit of fun at the past generations of Disney, is that this attraction took 10 years to happen.
Hmm.
You know, we kind of make fun of, I don't know, Pandora, Tron,
Journey of
Moana.
Water.
Exactly. And so this
Test
one
track.
took I know that that's a hot button for you. Was Test Track, cuz what you and your dad were waiting for that one to be built, and it was
Yeah,
forever.
years and years and years.
But this was 10 years to do this attraction.
Hmm.
Whereas, again, the thing I always think about when it takes so long to make an attraction is that they built Disneyland in a year. And of course, it wasn't what it needed to be at the time. And it's grown, and it was a shell or a kind of a shadow of what it is now. But they did it in a year. And now it takes, like, again, 5 6 years just to do a roller coaster seems ridiculous, but this was 10 years. But it wasn't necessarily like production costs or anything like that. They just didn't know what they were doing. And
Hmm.
in front of that, the 1964 World's Fair, which, again, I love the evolution of this attraction, that it started with, well, we think it's just going to be a walk-through attraction. And when I'm
Yeah.
watching that, and I don't know how you feel about that, the first thing I think of is how horrible the capacity would have been for a walk-through attraction as popular as this might have been. I don't think it would exist today
Yeah.
if it had been a walkthrough.
Yeah, no way. And Omnimover was absolutely necessary, and that technology was necessary. So they had to figure that out by '64. But back to your point that 10 years is a long time to wait in any time. Certainly then at a time where they could build an entire theme park in a year and a half, and definitely now. But the difference now is like they had the facade up, they had this like teaser plaque up that was like cute and in the theme. And now we have like these like plywood construction walls for like years. Like at that's really bad show. They somehow managed to preserve the show despite a decade of the production process. And that's what's really special.
One of the things is, again, they've built this facade, this haunted mansion, and they talk about in this, and we've heard it said before in other places, that Walt didn't want a dilapidated building in his beautiful park, and so he said, "Let's take care of the outside, and we'll let the ghost take care of the inside." And so they built this. Okay, let me pause for a second because it's a New Orleans style house, and you lived in New Orleans. Do you agree that, I mean, is this the kind
I
of thing you
did.
would have seen? Is the architecture, does it line up?
It does. It does. It looks a lot like what was it called? 12 Oaks Plantation, which is not actually New Orleans. It's like an hour outside, but they look like the plantation houses that you see along River Road in Louisiana for sure. A lot of them are white with columns, neoclassical kind of design, with the like the French wrought iron elements. It definitely fits in with New Orleans, where there, yeah, there you go. You can see the the columns and the wrought iron that's like very elaborate on the sides. Yeah, like that you could see that looks actually similar to like one of my friend's wedding venues, which was in New Orleans, and like so yes. I think they nailed it. I also think they nailed the one because I'm from New York originally, like the Hudson Valley style mansion for the one in Liberty Square looks, I think, exactly like homes, like houses that I visited in the Hudson Valley in New York. Amazing attention to detail.
So, and again, most of what we've been talking about up till now, or everything that we've been talking about, is really the Haunted Mansion in Disneyland. This was the first one. That wasn't always the case. Sometimes they would build it in Florida first and bring it to Disneyland, but this was the first one. And when they built it, they built this, as I was saying, they built the structure, and then they said, okay, well, we've got to make this attraction. But then what they decided to do was to create the stretching room, which is an elevator which goes down, and then they tunneled out past the berm and built a huge show building. I remember, I guess when I was growing up, it was always Disney World, and I always thought it was all in the mansion. because, I'm a kid. That's what I thought. And
Hmm.
then, by the time like Logic won out and I realized it's not, and I'm a little bit older, I remember telling my much older sister, hey, isn't it great the way they hide the show building? And she's like, what show building? Like, she, again, older, the just complete suspension of disbelief that everything was happening in this one,
Hmm.
haunted mansion. And so they had, like, again, the creativity of this basically all-star group of Imagineers to say, look, we want to do something, but we want it to be big. Now that it's not going to be walkthrough, and we're going to use this Omni Mover system that we've already established from the 1964 World's Fair, let's dig down and then go underneath and then have the huge show building happen. And I think that they do an amazing job of you never paying attention to the fact that you're going somewhere else. And so, also, always having been on the East Coast, it never occurred to me that the stretching room was actually designed originally to be an elevator. I don't know at what age were you when you finally heard about that? I'm sure you've only been to Disneyland a few times, right?
Yeah, but that was something that I'd read about in like again early version of like Disney fandom on the internet, and I think like a WDW Magic forum, or I'd read it in a magazine. I can't remember, but I did remember that one of them was an elevator and the other one like stretched upward and the other one stretched downward, and I wasn't sure which was which, and I asked a friend when I was 17 who worked at the Haunted Mansion in Florida for clarification, and then I never forgot the answer because obviously it's Florida. You can't dig down like 3 inches without hitting water. So they
Right.
didn't. That was not where they have the elevator descending downward. But yeah, I think I learned about it somewhere like 2001, 2002, something like that.
Yeah, and again, the first time I actually rode in it as an elevator and just like being almost giddy to the fact like, oh, this is so different, this is so cool, and yet at the same that when they built this, they actually built two of everything. Again, something that I
Mm-hmm.
already knew but was reinforced by this special is that they built two of everything because they built this in 1969. They were already on to the Florida project. They knew they wanted a haunted mansion, and so they built two of everything, which is so brilliant, and I'm sure saved them a ton of money at the time. Now I'm to the point where I always want there to be different things. I don't want there to be the
Mm-hmm.
same thing at Disneyland and Disney World. And here it is a little bit different because the outside's different. There's enough different to me that I'm okay with it. Plus the overlay that we'll talk about later. So it was pretty smart that they were able to build two of everything. So that's why I think that Florida and Disneyland are so similar, mostly during the show scenes. One thing I wanted to back up and talk about was Ex Intencio, who was the Imagineer who wrote Yo Ho Yo Ho, A Pirate's Life for Me, and Grim Grinning Ghost, and he was not like a lyricist. Like that to me, I actually got his autograph and he's since passed, but I got his
Oh,
autograph at the very first D23. No one at that time knew who he was, and I just walked up to him and I had a little goofy, like literally goofy Mickey autograph book, and I had him sign it. Um, and I'm just in awe. I'm in awe that you could just sit down and not just write a song, but write a song that stands the test of time and fits into this world.
yeah. And not a lyricist, but boy, are those really complicated, like Lin Manuel kind of lyrics. And I think like I have heard both of those songs like hundreds of thousands of times in my lifetime, and I still don't know the lyrics. It's like it's a little unfair, actually. What's more unfair is that he also wrote the song "A Parrot's Life" for me for the parrot outside the Pirates of the Caribbean, and my daughter heard that once on Spotify and then made me play it over and over and over again. So I've heard that song, which is less than a minute long and very annoying, also hundreds of thousands of times. And I also don't know all the words to that because the lyrics are that complicated, but they're also very clever when you listen to them.
Yeah, no, again, amazing. And I look back on all of these people as just geniuses and the things that they put together and think like, maybe I take for granted because it's a technological world that we live in now, the people who put together
Mm,
Flight of Passage, but what they had so much less to work with back then that I feel a greater appreciation for the original class of Imagineers and what they were able to bring to the table.
Yeah, and
Um,
they were doing everything for the first time. There were no theme parks. There were no examples of this. There was no Universal. There was no like theme parks
yeah.
around the world to like get this inspiration from. It's just carnival rides.
Carnival rides, exactly. And which, again, thinking of a haunted mansion, a haunted house at a carnival, this is a far cry from a haunted mansion at a carnival, or
Hmm.
just it's really neat the way they put it together, and it's just this mix of illusions and imagineering. There's a lot of things again in watching this that I don't think about, like the ramps that they had to build inside this thing. You just take for granted when you get into that dune buggy that you're just riding through this house. You don't think that they had to just plan out every lift and turn, and the fact that you go around Madame Leota when you go through that room, and then the thought process of the show scenes, because I know that we've got a lot of stories about what is the real story of the Haunted Mansion. Is it about the bride? Is it about Madame Leota? Is it about, and through the movies, they've kind of put it all together and said, yeah, it's about everybody. It's 999 Happy
Hmm.
Haunts. It's about all of them. It's about the sea captain and Master Gracie. And so I think we're going to talk about the Haunted Mansion, the new movie next week, but I think that did a better job than the Eddie Murphy version of telling that there are multiple stories that happen in here. But so again, it's neat. Not only the storytelling, not only the story of Mark Davis and Claude Coates working together and bringing a comedy and a horror sort of a thing, or a scare to this, but also all of the little tricks and things. And so again, thinking of the tricks, the Pepper's ghost effect and the ballroom scene. I don't think it was until like I actually worked there that it crossed my mind that those weren't really ghosts, because I didn't want to know how it was done. I mean, I know they're not really ghosts, but I didn't want to know how it was done. But then when you ride up there and you're in the middle of that, you're upstairs and you're looking down and you see things up, it never occurred to me that there's nothing really in front of you, because the Pepper's ghost effect is happening in a room above you and in a room below you. And I'm just like, again, it wasn't until I worked there I was like, oh crap, that's how that works. Like, but there's something specific about the dancers that I think that bothers you a lot.
It's true. It doesn't bother me exactly. It's like kind of a cool little secret, but because of the way Pepper's ghost effect works, it sort of like reverses what the projection's supposed to be, and so the men are technically being led by the women that are dancing. It's my favorite scene, so it's not like I wish they changed it, but it's like it's notable and sort of like, oh, that's very progressive when that's it, because it's jarring if you know anything about partner dancing. But it's also like it's I understand why they didn't think about that.
That's why they do it. It's very progressive. They were thinking ahead, and they were thinking, why can't the woman lead? That's nuts. We're gonna
That's right.
break that barrier right here. Something that never occurred to me also until recently, when we were talking about the placement of the Hatbox Ghost, which again we'll talk about in a second, but the Hatbox Ghost being placed where he's being placed in the one in Florida, was that Madame Leota's scene is the one that summons, it's that seance that summons the ghost to materialize. And I mean, again, I ride it all the time. Loved it as a kid. Was scared to death of it at first as a little kid. Then when I started riding it, loved it. And then, when I worked there, couldn't get enough of it. But it didn't really occur to me that you don't see the ghosts until then. And she summons them, and now you see ghosts all the way to the end, because she's asked them to materialize. And the big controversy is that the Hatbox Ghost is going to appear before we actually see the ghost materialize. And I think they tried to backtrack on that a little bit at Destination D23 and say, well, he's the Hatbox Ghost. He can materialize anywhere he wants to. Okay. But it doesn't follow suit with that. But that was another thing I thought about. Then you get up to the attic scene. The original bride, I, I, I always forget that the original bride was just, I don't know, like with the heartbeat and everything. I I am so glad that I don't know how you feel about it. I'm so glad that they updated this one with the projection mapping and the acts, and I do. Like,
Most of the updates I actually like in the Haunted Mansion, and yeah, that one for sure. That it this looks like like my hometown, like nursery where you'd buy like plants and stuff. Used to do like their own like haunted house, and every Halloween, and that looks like something they might have inside there. Like it just doesn't look to be up to the level of Disney Imagineering, especially given everything else that's in the mansion.
yeah, and now it's Constance Hatchaway,
Mm-hmm.
and it's she's got little bits that she does, and the axe appears, and yeah, if you never saw the original, you just don't know how bad it was. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I it was you get up into the attic, and the ghost heads that pop up in the grave scene now are were popping up in the attic, and so there was that like kind of that jump scare that would happen, and you would hear the thump 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 as you would approach her up at the top. So yeah, it's nice that they've replaced her there. The one in Haunted Mansion in California, and Daniel Joseph, who is a modern day Imagineer, um, figured out because apparently Yale Gracie was his Michael Jordan. He says he had posters of Yale Gracie, which I don't know where he got them because I don't know that they had them, but pictures
No,
on his
I
wall.
bet this is so. I had a poster of Michael Eisner in my childhood bedroom, and what I did was wrote to the Disney company because this was like something you could do. It wasn't like email. It was so easy to like email and ask for stuff, and I think you don't get as much now. But then, if you took the time to write a business letter and was like, "Hey, I would really like an autographed um, poster of Michael Eisner," they would send it to you. So I had one in my bedroom, and I'm sure that's what he did.
I did not know that you had a crush on Michael Eisner. That's great. No, I'm just kidding. The Hatbox Ghost was one of Yale Gracie apparently worked at the Magic Castle. He was famous for doing illusions, and he brought all of these illusions to what he did for Disney. And the fact that he came up with this Hatbox Ghost trick, and apparently they built it and then they put it according to again behind the attraction. Check it out. There was they built it, and then where they ended up putting it, the light wasn't the same, and the attraction or the effect, the illusion didn't work apparently. But this is a look at what the original Hatbox Ghost looked like, and there's Yale Gracie putting it together. Looks very janky in comparison to what we see, and maybe that's good. Maybe, I mean, he's supposed to look haunted, but the effect didn't
He
work.
looks less cartoonish though. I think he looks creepier,
Yeah, I agree.
even if it's like lower
um,
quality.
and so apparently they tried it, it didn't work, and they took it away, which reminds me again of another Disney thing. Did you ever hear the story of Big Red on the Animal Kingdom attraction
Oh,
Kilimanjaro
I
Safaris?
remember it. Yeah,
Yeah. So Big Red was
remember it well.
such a horrific scene that it seemed to work on paper, but it was just like Little Red's mom was basically murdered and on the side of the tram as you'd go by, and so they took it out after the first like a couple weeks, I think. And so here it's the same thing. Is after the first couple weeks they were like, this doesn't work. It's kind of doesn't jive with what we want to do here. It's not the level of excellence we want. We're going to take it out. And then it never came back until this Daniel Joseph came through and said, "Hey, I was a huge fan of E.L. Gracie. I've been working on this in my garage on my free time. Here's how this works." And then he made it work, and they put it into the Haunted Mansion in California, and I was really excited. And then at the D23 Expo last year, beautiful Josh D'Amaro came out and said, "Oh, and we're going to put the Haunted Mansion in Florida will now get their own Hatbox Ghost," and everybody's excited. But they're putting them in a different place. And again, we've talked about that on Park Center.
Mm-hmm.
It just seems like there's a place that you could put him right there at the exit of the attic, and it could be the same
Mm-hmm.
thing, but they're mixing it up and they're putting him over by the endless hallway.
Somewhere it doesn't make any sense. And I know you said like that's not something you noticed about like the spirits materializing and that being
Right.
the part of the story. But that is something that I internalized by the time I was like 12. I was like, no, 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 I get this. She's like bringing them forth. I think I used to get kind of scared on it because it is still a little scary. And the first half to me is actually scarier because you actually don't know. You see like the eyes following you and things are getting like kind of ghoulish or more and more ghoulish. And then after she has them all materialize, it's like it's a swinging wake and they're playing and having a good time. And it's like, it's almost like a relief because, oh, you see like they're not like, uh, weird poltergeists or something that are playing tricks on you. And so having the hot box ghost there really breaks that first half where you're like creepy, what's going to happen, I don't know. And now like so you see a full figure is like I think ruins the story that's there. um, a lot of these like original attractions like Pirates of the Caribbean and I mean, really, just that and Haunted Mansion. I really like that level of story where there's enough where you can like use your imagination, but there's still like sort of a base. Whereas if you look at something like Big Thunder, it's like really just all imagination. This is all theming. There's no like real clear story. Oh, it's abandoned ghost town, mine. Okay, runaway train. But like you get to kind of play that story out. Haunted Mansion is not that, but it's also not like this scripted like ride through of a like retelling of a movie. So I think it's really important in something like that to like respect the integrity of like the story that's there and the structure of the story that's there. So for me, it's upsetting. I'm glad that we're getting the Hatbox Ghost, but it just like seems any number of places you could put it anywhere in the graveyard scene would be great. You can put him before you see the hitchhiking ghosts. Like there's plenty of space there. Places like a diorama, you can move some stuff around to make room for him, but he shouldn't be in the endless hallway.
My thought is that they probably thought, "Hey, we're going to take all this time and put this in. It needs to be a showcase." That scene with the endless hallway, by design, is made so that you spend time understanding as you turn. This is an endless hallway. Look down there and see what you see. And so I think you spend more time there. I think if it was in the graveyard, it would probably get overwhelmed by everything that's there. Like I still can't keep track of everything that's in the graveyard. Sometimes I'm in there, I'm like, okay, the bike's not working, or whatever. But I mean, I am looking around for certain things. Um, but I don't disagree with you. I think there's a number of places that it could have been. Um,
You know what I think
it's
though about the endless hallway? Like that, you're right. You are staring at it like, what is this? And the reason is because that effect has never really worked great. Like it's really not clear what that place is. And I think that's why they're putting him in there because I think guests are like, wait, what is this? What? Like it's just like a floating candelabra. It's really unclear that that's supposed to be like spooky. Oh, we're never getting out of here. There's like, you could go on forever in this place. That's never been visually clear. So I think that's the real reason, but that's a silly reason. Make that effect work better and put it somewhere else.
No, yeah. Again, I don't disagree with you. I think we again on Park Center were all about like, hey, this is the wrong place for this to be, and I think most people were, and I think that's why again they brought out at Destination D23 they brought out Daniel Joseph, and he was on stage. He was talking about the
Mm-hmm.
Hatbox Ghost coming, which again is weird because the Hatbox Ghost isn't there yet. The movie came out and was all about the Hatbox Ghost, which again we'll talk about the movie next week, and then they there's Halloween, and they missed two huge opportunities to put this thing in. And I can't imagine it's not ready to go because you already have it. It already exists. To your point, you were talking about before the early Imagineers had to make up everything on their own. This thing already exists, unless it's going to be next level over top of what they have in California, which would be great. They really should have had it in there already. I know that the Haunted Mansion switched places with the Marvels, as far as release date, so it would have released somewhere closer to Thanksgiving. But again, I feel like if it already exists, you could have increased your timetable, throw a little bit of money at it, make it happen in time for that movie to come out. Because just like when you go see a Marvel movie or you watch the Marvel Loki series and then Loki appears in Avengers Campus the next day, or you're watching Ahsoka and Hera and Chopper appear in Galaxy's Edge the next day, it would be nice if they had this movie and you went and saw it, and then it's like your kid goes, hey, can we go to Disney and see the Hatbox Ghost? Yeah, you can, in Disneyland, but in Disney World, it's not coming until almost Christmas. I don't know. That seems like poor planning. It seems like a missed opportunity. Um,
Hmm.
let me get off that soapbox and get on another. Something that people talk about a lot is the Anna and Elsa projection mapping faces on the haunted mansion. It's very haunted. It's very scary. Forever, the Frozen Ever After attraction. So their projection faces, and I think we give that a hard time. I think it works in Seven Dwarfs. But what I was thinking when I was watching this is that's kind of this technology, right? I mean,
Hmm.
it
I was
obviously
thinking
the
that too. Like, oh, they've always done projection mapping. Like,
right. Yeah, I mean the singing busts are projections on still images. I mean still
mhm.
objects, not moving. Um, but yeah, this
The
technology has
original
existed for a
hitchhiking
while.
ghosts are also like essentially projection mapping.
Okay, so I wanted to ask you about that too, because again, I know we're talking about behind the attraction. We're talking about Disney Plus. We're not doing an hour on the Haunted Mansion, but we kind of are. So when I was watching that and they show that end scene where like the ghost will follow you home, the one in Florida has changed from the kind of there was an animatronic behind the mirror and you're in front of it, and so it was sort of a weird kind of a Pepper's ghost sort of a situation where it looked like you looked into the mirror and that ghost was in the car with you. Then somebody said, hey, we can plus this out and we can make these computer generated ones which do some pretty neat things. But I do you prefer the old one?
I feel like you're leading me to want me to prefer the old one. And I mean, like maybe for nostalgia, but I think like objectively for people who are seeing it for the first time, or like this is a little bit more playful, a little more fun. And they look a little clearer because the Pepper's Ghost was kind of hard to see. And I think, like, I don't know, everything right now is through the eyes of my kid, and think my kid will get more out of this than the original. And so, for that reason, I think I
That's fair.
like the newer version. I know it's like
Yes.
jarring for people, and I feel that way about a lot of changes in show scenes, especially with classic rides. But this is one where I feel like the technology is just better, and it's like just like a little bit more fun for new people. But yeah, I know I miss the old one as well, but it's kind of weird. They're kind of static, and they've sort of
Right.
been like half in your body and somebody else's. It was just a little strange, I think.
Yeah, and because of them being animatronics inside probably a reverse dune buggy, they came in and they would go like
Mm-hmm.
they would shift. Um okay, yeah, I was kind of leading you a little bit on that one, but there are some neat effects that they do. But going back to the whole base of that conversation is in this special, they talk kind of
Mm-hmm.
about there's a kind of a bit that they do where they're like, no, it's too iconic, you can't change the haunted mansion. And then the next person is saying, well, you should change it. And it's like, but you can't ever change it, but you should change it. I mean, I feel like they've done a decent job over the years of plussing this out.
Yeah, and preserving the integrity of the original attraction, but in updating things with technology, like the bride in the attic, definitely better. You
What
can
about the
disagree about hitchhiking. Leota's face looks better.
yeah, true, and floats now too.
Yeah,
Like
that's
that
cool.
wasn't part of the original thing. Now she floats. What about the in there's some stuff they're going to be doing in California, which again has nothing to do with this special because they didn't talk about it. To kind of change up the outside of like the queue and such. When they made the changes to the queue in the one in Florida, though, they added this entire like interactive queue to the attraction, which seems like now they almost push you by it anymore and you don't get to go in there and play around. Are you a fan of the new interactive queue, or are you just ready to get
Yeah.
into the mansion?
That's a good question. I haven't played with an interactive queue since like 2012. So it's
Mhm.
like, because I think you're exactly right. You sort of get pushed by it. But when I saw it for the first time, I was a fan. I think it's really neat. Um, I like interactive queue elements. It's one of the things that I think that like, um, a lot of early Disney, there was a lot of switchbacks and not a ton of like care in all of the queues, and thinking a little bit more about that in the last 15, 20 years, which to me is recent. So yeah, I like it. But if I have a choice between getting into the mansion or like playing with the interactive queue, I'd rather get inside.
Well, you say like the switchback style queues. What's the worst queue?
The worst queue at Disney.
Hmm.
Well, in Disneyland, right in front of the Haunted Mansion, is a nightmare. I mean, the sun's beating down on you. There is zero shade there, and you're just like in switchbacks for like 15 minutes before you get in, and it's hot there like all the way through like November. It's like 104 degrees and dry, and you're just going through that. In Disney World, oh gosh, uh, Astro Orbiter, you don't move, you're in switchbacks. There's nothing to look at, and there's minimal shade. Depending on where their sun is, maybe People Mover gives you like you get like half of your face will be in shade, but otherwise you're melting there for like at least an hour because that line it takes a while. Load capacity is not great up there.
Yeah. Yeah, it's something else about the Haunted Mansion and the way that they move you through. And I always say that like I feel like there's science behind everything Disney does, and maybe there's not because a lot of times it's like, why did you do it this way? But when you're in the Haunted Mansion specifically, you are single file until you get
Mm-hmm.
right before you're going in. And this is both the Florida one and the California one. Right before you're going in, they start to group you, and then they push you all into that room together, and now there's no order to anything, and everybody's on their own. And then they take that whole group on both California and Florida, and they funnel you into a single line again. They force you in to a single line. I hate that. I hate it at
Yeah,
Guardians of the
like Tower
Galaxy.
of Terror.
Yeah, I mean it's just like it's this push and shove thing, and I guess again I feel like there's some kind of a science behind it where they were like, okay, this works better for people management if we do X. But just you can see that wedge when you come out of the Haunted Mansion stretching room in Florida, and you see that wedge, and you've either got to back off a little bit and let everybody else do their thing, or you've got to speed walk and beat everybody else so that you're not like shoulder to shoulder doing that thing. I don't know. I
Mm-hmm.
not a fan of that. And again, I feel like the worst one now is Guardians of the Galaxy because you're single file, then they put you in groups that move into the rooms, and then when you are loading back into a line to get on the coaster, there is a sharp funnel that you have to go through, and it feels like once I get past this, I'll be okay. But I don't love that. But again, Haunted Mansion feels like that's the first place that I've ever seen this.
Doesn't bother me as long as I'm in the air conditioning.
Fair. That's a fair point. Moving on through the special, one of the other things they do, and I love this about the behind the scenes or the behind the attraction episodes, is that it's like the one that's about Star Tours starts off about Star Tours, but kind of ends up about Galaxy's Edge. The one about Space Mountain starts out about Space Mountain, kind of ends up about Tron, because they're talking about the things that inspired other things. And here we're talking about the fact that every castle park, and I think except Shanghai, every castle park has a mansion. But when they went and did this for Florida, they just did two of everything from what they were building for Disneyland. When they went and did it for Tokyo, they just copied what they did in Florida, so it's the same kind of a thing, but it's in Fantasyland. Which I like. I didn't know that it was in Fantasyland until I watched the special because I have not been to
Yeah.
Tokyo. You would have thought I would have heard Tom talk about that 18, 19 times before, but I didn't know that it was in Fantasyland. I kind of love like getting that information. And then when we go to Phantom Manor in Paris, that's in Frontierland. So the first four of these are not even any of them in the same park. Like Jungle Cruise is always in Adventureland, but this one rotates around. I think that's kind of neat, Laura,
Yeah.
right?
It's super neat. And it's funny because I had put notes down of like the things that were totally new to me or like I thought were like pretty new to me. And that's like probably the biggest one is that Tokyo's is in Fantasyland. I had no idea. Um, but I did know because I've been to Phantom Manor and I'm really, I think that's a really special version. of the Haunted Mansion, and I think it fits so well in Frontierland that I didn't like. I never thought about it. I never gave it a second thought. And I think I also never really, well, I think I hadn't gone to Disneyland until I was much, much older. So I hadn't thought about New Orleans Square uh,
Liberty.
Liberty Square at all. But yeah, they're all somewhere different, and they all have a different aesthetic, except for Tokyo, which has the same aesthetic as Disney World, which is weird
So
because
yeah,
Tokyo always does things differently.
so yeah, exactly. So Phantom Manor to me, it's like a different story, and but it's still the Haunted Mansion. It's Phantom Manor, but it's still the Haunted
Mm-hmm.
Mansion. When
Mm-hmm.
when they go on to talk about the fact, and again, this is something I already had learned elsewhere, but when they reinforce it here, talking about Mystic Manor, that Mystic Manor, it's because of the Western idea of what a ghost is, as opposed to the ancestral spirits
Mm-hmm.
that in the East, that like these are not things that would jump out to scare you. These are people who are there to protect you, and so that makes sense to me that they would be okay. We don't need a haunted mansion with ghosts here. That's not going to make any sense. And yet I don't know that Mystic Manor feels like it counts as a haunted mansion.
Yeah, I fully agree. And so one of the things that we do in my family is watch ride videos a lot with my daughter. And she loves all of them. And she's actually said, Mama, why are all the good rides in Tokyo? And I have no answer for that. Four, she already notices that there's differences there. And we've watched Mystic Manor, and it's actually too frenetic for her. Like she doesn't want to watch the whole thing. There's like so much going on. It's totally overwhelming. And it feels a lot more like if the Adventurers Club had an attached ride, like this is what it would be, which is great.
Right.
I love like see the Society of Explorers and Adventurers. Like I was a huge Adventurers Club fan for my whole life. I spent a lot of evenings there. Um, I like Skipper Canteen, but it's hard to make this to say this really counts as a mansion, especially given the ride story with the monkey and the Pandora's box, and like it just feels like it doesn't fit. And there's just like nothing. And then the whole ride system, it's not even an omnimover. You have the
Right.
independently moving vehicles, which really cool. I think I would enjoy going on it, but it doesn't at all feel like it qualifies. It's fine. I'll let it count.
No, I agree. I mean, that's why I brought it up. Is it doesn't feel like it should count as a haunted mansion. I mean, if you have, the Tower of Terror is different over there as well. So the Tower of Terror is, it's got a different vibe of how and why the things that are happening. But when it comes to this, it feels like a completely different attraction. In the Space Mountain, and again, you said you've seen all these episodes. In the Space Mountain episode, they kind of say that Tron is the evolution of Space Mountain, and to me, it's different. It's like it's not the same thing. It's based on a movie where Space Mountain was an original IP. Um, the only thing that's
Mm-hmm.
similar is that there is an indoor part of it that is in the dark.
Yeah.
To me, like that's
Yeah.
about it. The ride vehicles are different. Everything's different about it, and so to count it
Mm-hmm.
as a Space Mountain doesn't seem like it makes sense. So when they talk about it in here and they link it with the Haunted Mansions, I would love to ride Mystic Manor. It's actually one that I've watched the ride through with because I'm like, when am I going to Hong Kong? Like, I don't know that that's happening. Um, but when I look at this and I'm like, it just doesn't seem like it fits. So they talked about the evolution of the haunted mansions and the different ones that are out there. The other thing that they talk about is the Haunted Mansion Holiday, which I'm a huge Jack Skellington fan, as you know. I love A Nightmare Before Christmas, and I love that this exists. It was one of those things that made me want to finally go back to California because I'd only been one time before, and it was on a layover that I shouldn't have taken as much time to enjoy Disneyland, but I'd never been there. Um, and so the next time I went back, it was like one of the main reasons I wanted to go back was to do Haunted Mansion Holiday. And for those of you that don't know, which I assume anybody who's watching this does, they talk about it a little bit here. Is that it has they take the Haunted Mansion and they change it. It's more of an overlay than any other attraction overlay that I think I've ever seen, and they change it for Halloween and Christmas, which is brilliant that they can do that. They change it like 1st of September and it rolls through like mid January. and it's, Jack Skellington's taking over the Haunted Mansion, and it's a completely, to me, a completely different attraction that's using the same things. The stretching room is great. But what I did hear at one point was they made 2 copies of that stuff as well, one for Florida and one for California. And then Florida either didn't want it, or they felt like because you don't have a lot of locals and regulars in the people will want to see the Haunted Mansion in its original form when they come on their once in a lifetime vacation, that they put it and they took it to Tokyo. So Tokyo has that other overlay. Have you done that overlay?
I haven't. The one time that I was in Disney, I've never done Disneyland's Haunted Mansion. I've just done ride-through videos because
Ah,
though I was
gotcha.
there, it was there during the Haunted Mansion holiday, and that I was in the queue, which is how I know that queue is horrendous. Since I lasted like 45 minutes in 104-degree heat, and I was like, I can't spend my whole day here because I only have a day and I want to see other things, and it was really devastating because I wanted to see that. But it's a reason to go back.
Yeah, for sure. But again, I love that they return it to the actual Haunted Mansion afterwards. I would love to live in a world where both of them exist at the same time, some sort of a version of this that's a year-round attraction. But it makes sense, and it makes it special that it can only be seen from September through January. And so I love that. I love that they've added that. I wish they had it in Florida so it's a little bit more accessible to me. But I love that it exists. So with all of that, one thing that they open this episode with that I didn't talk about was Paul Frees, the great Paul Frees voiceover, who is our ghost host. This is how the attraction opens: is some basically outtake tape of him saying, "Okay, is it like that? Do you want me to be more breathy? I'm your host. And I love, like, Paul Frees. He's there, and he used to be the auctioneer, I think, in the Pirates of the Caribbean. And the Burgermeister Meisterburger. If you guys have ever watched Santa Claus is Coming to Town, that's Paul Frees. He is he was an amazing voice actor, and I love that he is the ghost host, and I hope that never changes. But it was really neat to hear those
Yeah.
outtakes.
Yeah, it better not ever change.
Um, Yeah, and so again, this is basically the behind the attraction. It's about 45 minutes. Actually, running time is about 40 if you cut out the intro and the commercials. Um, I you know I don't know if there's anything else you want to say about this episode. Think about this before we go to final thoughts on this. But the one other thing I was going to say is that there is a new season coming of Behind the Attraction in November. So the one in November is going to include Pirates of the Caribbean, Big Thunder Mountain, Indiana Jones Adventure, Epcot as one of them. That's kind of cool. The food. There was some in season 1 that were like trams, monorails, and trains, and another one that was like the Disneyland Hotel. So they're not all behind the attraction, but it's behind, kind of something that Disney does. And so food is one, and then also nighttime spectaculars is one. So I'm really looking forward to this next season. That's only 6 episodes. I don't know if there will be more as part of that, but those are the 6 episodes that they announced on the Disney Parks blog. So excited to see that starting on November 1st, season 2. If you enjoyed season 1, I assume you're gonna just eat up season 2. No crumbs. Anyway, anything else you wanted to talk about before we go? Final thoughts here.
Okay, so I was talking before about how I put a list of like things that I think were new to me, and they're not much. Most of it was like I just reminding me of things that I had known. But one of the things that I don't know that I ever knew, but that Pepper's ghost was actually named for a guy named Pepper. Like that was new. Like I think because like the effect, like it sounds like what it is, right? There's something about it that's like, oh, it like it looks like an apparition or something. Pepper sounds like a really good term for that, but it's actually a guy's name. So I guess in this there's several like names that are just like so perfect for what they are, like layout of tombs. But that was one thing that really stuck out.
Before we get to final thoughts, let me say thanks to everybody for watching. We really appreciate you tuning in Deep in the Plus every Wednesday night at 9 p.m. Don't forget, next week we're going to be talking about the new Haunted Mansion movies. So join us for a panel discussion next Wednesday night on the Haunted Mansion. Also, we love our WIGS members. Thank you to our WIGS members. We love you, the WDWNT Interglobe Society. Thank you guys for being part of our family. If you have not already, or if you are interested in joining, go to patreon.com/WDWNT for more. And of course, don't forget to join us for Park Center on Sunday night. We are looking forward to having you guys join us at 9 p.m. Eastern, and we'll be talking about all the latest parks news. So thank you guys for being here. Thanks for watching. And Allison, now is the time. Now is the big moment that everybody's waiting for. I don't think they really are, because I think we have gushed over this enough that I think we all know the answer to this. But Allison, would you recommend this episode?
Well, I absolutely recommend this episode to pretty much anyone who likes Disney parks. And as my dad likes to say, you either like Disney parks, so you're two kinds of people in the world. People who either like Disney or the other people who are just wrong. So for pretty much everybody, I think like this is something that's enjoyable. So for me, as like a deep Disney adult fan of all things, particularly attractions, like and my love and affection for this particular attraction, like this is a must watch. And I think all the episodes are really a must watch. And I'm really looking forward to a new season of this. And I wish they'd make more. My only complaint is that these are not longer, but if they were longer, then they wouldn't be as accessible to people who are just like casual fans of the parks. And I think people really do appreciate that. So I 100% recommend this to anyone who's not a total Scrooge.
Okay, that's fighting words, I guess. I would say, though, again, I would agree with you. I would recommend this to anybody, this entire series, especially to people who are casual fans of Disney parks too, because I think it's fun. I think it's neat information, and it's presented in a fun way. It's a little cheesy at some times. I will kind of give you that if you haven't already seen it. It can be a little bit cheesy, but in general, it's fun, and I hope that that season 2 is as fun as season 1 was. But to me, it's finding those little nuggets of things that I don't know, but also I don't mind hearing the things again that I do know when they start talking about it, and they're covering some interesting topics. It's a Small World was in season 1. The castles in general were in season 1, but the Haunted Mansion episode specifically, not just because it's spooky season, but also this one specifically, I really enjoyed this one. I think more than most, and I don't know if it's my love of the attraction, the way it was presented, seeing the whole Raleigh Crump talking about playing jokes on the janitors. I don't know. It was just, to me, this is, of the 10, probably my favorite episode. And we may do reviews later of some of these other episodes, but this one to me was a good one to talk about the entire series, and one that I think represents it the best. So let us know in the comments what you think. We would love to get your thoughts on, did you watch it? Did you love it? What did you think? Just tell us about your experiences with the Haunted Mansion in general, or things that you didn't know, just like we did when we watched it. So again, thanks to everybody for watching. We appreciate you. Hope you have a great week, and we'll hopefully see you Sunday night for another episode of Park Center. Don't forget, News Tonight tomorrow night as well. Have a great one. Thanks, Allison. Appreciate you.